From the very first moment the little black girl stepped onto the flight from Atlanta to New York, the discriminatory glares and unfairness from a flight attendant who asked her to change seats to accommodate a wealthy white family were palpable. But no one in the crew could have anticipated that the powerful father, standing behind this little girl, was, in fact, the highest-ranking official in the American aviation industry. The truth was quickly revealed, causing the entire flight crew to turn pale in shock and forcing them to pay the price for their deep-seated prejudice. What seemed like a routine flight turned into a shocking tale of power, fairness, and self-respect. American Airlines Flight AA2187, scheduled to depart from Atlanta to New York, was more lively than usual that morning. As passengers slowly made their way through the boarding gate into the cabin, all eyes unintentionally turned towards a little black girl, around 7 years old, holding her mother's hand as they walked ahead. Her name was Sophia Evans, petite and cute, drawing everyone's gaze. What made Sophia stand out was the bright yellow dress she was wearing. The dress, like the summer sun, highlighted her healthy skin and the confident smile on her face. In her other hand was a small gray stuffed bunny that she affectionately called Boo. Beside Sophia was her mother, Jessica Evans, an elegant middle-aged woman with sharp, insightful eyes. Jessica always maintained a calm yet resolute demeanor, something she had honed over years of being with her husband, David Evans, the current administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. For Jessica, every flight was special because she knew the strictness and responsibility involved in her husband's work. But today was even more special, as she and Sophia were headed to New York to attend an important event where David Evans would give a keynote speech to the aviation industry leaders. "Here's our seat, Sophia," Jessica said softly as they stopped at rows 14, seats A and B. Sophia eagerly tapped the window seat and asked, "Can I sit here, Mom? I want to watch the clouds." Jessica smiled, helped her daughter settle in, and gently placed their luggage in the overhead bin. The passengers around them discreetly observed the two, perhaps partly due to the girl's striking appearance, and also because of the sophisticated and graceful way Jessica carried herself. Sophia quickly settled in, her eyes fixed on the window, her little face excited as she watched fuel trucks, luggage carts, and ground crew busily finishing their final tasks before the plane could take off. A moment later, she turned back to hug Boo and whispered a few secrets that only the two of them could understand. Jessica sat next to her daughter, taking the opportunity to review the final notes for the New York event on her laptop. She knew this trip was important not just for David, but also as a chance for their family to be closer after months of separation due to work. But she had no idea that in just a few moments, an unexpected situation would unfold on this very flight. One that would challenge her resolve and teach young Sophia a valuable lesson about society, fairness, and the courage to confront prejudice. The plane's engines began to roar, and passengers buckled up. The soft voice of a flight attendant could be heard from the front, welcoming passengers and introducing the flight. Jessica looked at her daughter, whose innocent and hopeful expression brought her comfort. Yet, deep within her intuition, she sensed that today's flight would be special in a way she had never imagined. While Sophia was still lost in admiring the white clouds gradually appearing outside the window, Jessica faintly heard footsteps approaching. A young flight attendant with neatly styled blonde hair appeared beside their row of seats. The name tag pinned to her uniform read, Heather. Heather's face seemed pleasant at first glance, but there was something uneasy in her deep blue eyes. "Sorry to disturb you," Heather said with a polite but somewhat strained smile. "We need you and your daughter to please move to the seats at the back, row 27, to make room for another family." Jessica immediately felt a wave of caution creeping into her mind. She glanced quickly to the back. Row 27 was close to the bathroom, where people were constantly passing by, and the space was cramped and clearly less comfortable than the seats she and Sophia were currently occupying. "Is there a problem with our seats?" Jessica asked calmly but clearly. Heather hesitated for a moment before answering, her eyes briefly avoiding Jessica's, as if she were convincing herself of the reason for this request. "It's not a problem with the seats, Mrs. Evans." The flight attendant lowered her voice, almost whispering. "The Whitley family, who are currently seated in the first-class section, have a son with health issues. They would like to sit closer to this area for easier access when needed. I hope you understand." Jessica turned her gaze to the aisle. A well-dressed white family stood waiting, their expressions a mix of confusion and slight dissatisfaction as they awaited her decision. The tall, sophisticated man stood next to a graceful blonde woman, and a boy about Sophia's age, dressed in the uniform of a prestigious private school, looked visibly bored and impatient. Jessica knew exactly what was happening. She wasn't one to miss such subtle cues. In that moment, she recalled Sophia's look when they were asked to sit near the kitchen area at an upscale restaurant despite having reserved a nice table. She didn't want her daughter to witness something like that again. "We've had these seats reserved for a long time," Jessica replied gently but firmly, "and honestly, I think there may be a better solution for accommodating their family." Heather paused, seemingly surprised by Jessica's firm response. The smile on her face appeared a little forced now, and for the first time, Jessica noticed the discomfort in those cold blue eyes. "We've carefully considered this, ma'am," Heather explained further, her voice lower now but tinged with impatience. "The Whitley family has a son who needs to be near the restroom for health reasons. This isn't just a typical request." Jessica silently observed, clearly understanding the underlying implication in the flight attendant's words. She understood, but she couldn't accept the way Heather was dismissing her and her daughter's legitimate rights. This wasn't just about a seat. This was about respect and fairness. Sophia had now started paying attention to the conversation, her bright black eyes focused on her mother, her tiny hand clutching her stuffed bunny Boo tighter. Sophia might not fully grasp the situation, but her sharp intuition was enough to sense the tension in her mother's voice and the strange way the flight attendant was looking at them. "Excuse me?" Jessica sighed lightly, her voice calm but resolute. "I truly sympathize with the Whitley boy's health condition, but I believe there are other options on this plane, and there's no need to ask us to give up the seats we've reserved." Heather stiffened, clearly not expecting such a strong and clear opposition from Jessica. The young flight attendant's cheeks reddened slightly in discomfort, her eyes briefly flicking toward the Whitley family, sensing the pressure from them. At that moment, Dr. Richard Whitley stepped forward, his voice polite but carrying an unmistakable air of authority. "Mrs. Evans, I presume. I'm Dr. Richard Whitley. I understand that moving seats may cause inconvenience, but I hope you'll cooperate. My son really needs to be in this area for health reasons. Could you please assist us?" His voice was courteous, but there was an underlying confidence that suggested he expected his request to be granted. Jessica looked him squarely in the eyes, recognizing the invisible power that had led him to believe this was a simple request, just a word from him, and others should comply. "I understand the situation, Doctor. Whitley," Jessica replied politely but firmly, "but I think this matter should be resolved differently. My daughter and I will not be moving seats. I hope you understand." The atmosphere in the cabin seemed to freeze after her words. Sophia had now inched closer to her mother, her instincts telling her that this wasn't just a small issue. She unconsciously hugged Boo tighter, for the first time losing the confidence she had carried throughout the flight. Heather stood in the middle of the conversation, her face growing paler as she struggled to figure out how to handle the firm stance of Jessica and the unspoken expectation of Dr. Whitley. Tension continued to rise as an older, more authoritative flight attendant approached from the front of the plane. The woman, with the name tag Patricia, quickly assessed the situation with a cold gaze, scanning Jessica and Sophia before stopping and asking sharply, "Is there a problem here?" Jessica could clearly feel that this wasn't just a debate over seating arrangements. At a deeper level, it was a confrontation about dignity and equality that she would have to defend for herself and her daughter in front of the many eyes watching them on the plane. Patricia's words hung in the air, and the atmosphere in the cabin grew even heavier. What seemed like a simple question from her had made the entire plane's attention shift to Jessica and her daughter. A few passengers nearby began to whisper, casting curious and uncomfortable glances in their direction. Jessica understood those stares all too well. As a black woman, she had faced similar moments in her life. The scrutinizing gazes, the whispered words laced with malice. But this time was different because the person witnessing it all was Sophia, her precious daughter, whom she had always tried to protect from the unfair biases of society. "This family refuses to move," Heather spoke up first, her voice carrying a tone of reprimand, though it was masked by a thin veil of forced politeness. "The Whitley family needs to sit closer because of health reasons. We've explained this, but Ms. Evans won't cooperate." Patricia's sharp gaze immediately landed on Jessica's face, scrutinizing her with intense seriousness. Jessica felt the weight of that stare, but she remained resolute, refusing to bow her head. "Ma'am, we've done nothing wrong," Jessica said calmly, her voice steadier than ever. "My daughter and I have booked these exact seats. We absolutely have the right to decline any seat change request if it doesn't make sense." At that moment, Dr. Whitley stepped closer to Patricia, placing a hand gently on his wife's shoulder, his face serious but still polite. "I don't want to make a scene, but my son truly needs this seat. He's not well, and we're used to seating arrangements like this. This may just be a small misunderstanding." Dr. Whitley's words were courteous, yet carried an underlying implication of power. Patricia's expression softened with marked respect, and it was clear that she was beginning to lean toward the Whitley family. Meanwhile, Heather stood silently, casting a brief, reproachful glance at Jessica, as if to silently question why she was being so stubborn. Sophia, sensing the tension, quietly moved closer to her mother. Her young heart could feel the unease and discomfort of the situation. She recalled a time when her family had gone to a fancy restaurant in Atlanta and had been asked by the staff to move to a corner table near the kitchen, even though they had specifically reserved a nice table by the window. She remembered how her mother had steadfastly refused then, but her mother's eyes had held a quiet sadness, an injustice that Sophia hadn't fully understood at the time. Sophia tugged gently at Jessica's sleeve, whispering with enough concern for nearby passengers to overhear, "Mom, is this like what happened at the restaurant before?" Sophia's innocent question shattered the tense silence, leaving a few passengers visibly unsettled. Even Dr. Whitley frowned briefly, seeming slightly uncomfortable under the scrutiny of the other passengers. His wife, impeccably styled with her blonde hair, quickly whispered to her husband, "Richard, let it go. We can find another way. Don't cause more tension." But Dr. Whitley wasn't willing to back down easily. For him, his family's convenience was more important than anything else at that moment. He cleared his throat again as though reminding Patricia and the attendants who was in charge. "I'm sure the airline has policies for handling such special circumstances. Perhaps Miss Patricia could come up with a more appropriate solution instead of continuing to inconvenience everyone." Jessica felt a deep sense of hurt from Dr. Whitley's words. clearly meant to turn the tables and make her seem like the troublemaker. But what stung even more was the look of worry and disappointment gradually appearing on Sophia's small face. Jessica knew she had to be stronger than ever in this moment. She met Patricia's eyes, her voice firm yet still composed, full of dignity. "I'm not causing trouble. We're simply protecting our rightful interests. I trust the airline will come up with a fairer solution." Patricia paused for a moment, as if weighing her decision. The air was thick with tension. Sophia lowered her head, her small hands trembling as she clutched her stuffed rabbit boo tightly. Now, she understood the sadness in her mother's eyes from that previous unfair treatment. But this time was different. Sophia could feel the courage and resolve radiating from her mother, and it steadied her own nerves. She lifted her eyes to her mother, her trust in her unwavering. In that tense moment, Patricia slowly spoke, her voice stern but clear, directing her words toward Jessica like a final verdict. "Miss Evans, I'm afraid I must ask you and your daughter to cooperate in changing seats to resolve this situation quickly." A wave of anger surged within Jessica, but she remained unexpectedly calm. She knew that if she accepted silently, not only would Sophia never learn the important lesson of self-respect and equality, but future injustices would also be harder to fight. And Jessica decided she would not back down, at least not this time. As Patricia's stern demand echoed through the cabin, a heavy silence descended upon the airplane. Passengers nearby began to feel uneasy, some casting uncomfortable glances toward Jessica, while others clearly waited to see how she would respond. Heather took a small step back, trying to hide the faint satisfaction that briefly flashed across her eyes as Patricia made her decision, as though assuming everything had been resolved in the way she wanted. Jessica slowly stood up, her face calm but her eyes sharp and full of dignity. She met Patricia's gaze directly, making it clear that she would not be easily swayed by pressure from anyone. Sophia looked up, confused and worried, her small hand tightly gripping her mother's, as if searching for safety and reassurance. "Excuse me," Jessica said softly, her voice steady, each word clear and deliberate. "I believe there has been some misunderstanding here. We absolutely do not wish to cause trouble for anyone, but I cannot agree with such an unfair decision." Patricia furrowed her brow, her face hardening with clear displeasure. She was used to handling situations quickly and efficiently, and rarely encountered such strong resistance. Patricia took half a step forward, her voice becoming more rigid, like a warning. "I understand, but this is not a request for you to consider. It is a directive from the crew. Please cooperate immediately, or I will have to take stronger measures." In that moment, Sophia felt her heart race. She clutched her stuffed rabbit boo tightly, her wide, dark eyes never leaving her mother, a faint flicker of fear in them. Jessica noticed this, a wave of pain and anger rising within her. This was not just about her own rights. It was about the dignity and fairness she had to protect for herself, and especially for her daughter. She knew that if she gave in today, Sophia would always remember this moment as a defeat, an acceptance of injustice in life. Patricia now showed clear signs of impatience. She lowered her voice, but the tone remained commanding and firm. "Please tell me your name so we can report it to the crew." Jessica looked Patricia in the eye, lifting her chin slightly, her response calm and precise. "My name is Jessica Evans, and this is my daughter, Sophia Evans." The moment Evans was spoken, Patricia froze, as if she had heard something unbelievable. The confidence and firmness that had been evident on the veteran flight attendant's face moments before quickly evaporated. Patricia stared at Jessica for a moment, her expression shifting rapidly from irritation to surprise, and finally to a subtle, barely concealed panic. Evans, Patricia repeated, her voice trembling with doubt. Sorry, Miss Evans, but are you related to Mr. David Evans, the administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration? The tense atmosphere in the cabin suddenly shifted to one of intense curiosity from the surrounding passengers. Heather paled, turning to look at Patricia with a mixture of confusion and concern. Dr. Whitley and his wife also seemed taken aback, stepping back slightly, waiting for Jessica's response. Jessica looked Patricia directly in the eye, her usual composure now accompanied by the strength that came from her name and identity. Jessica's voice rang clear, without hesitation. David Evans is my husband, and the father of Sophia. Jessica's words hit the cabin like a powerful wave, drawing every eye toward her. Patricia, who had just moments ago displayed authority and resolve, now appeared clearly flustered and awkward. She took a deep breath, glancing at Heather as though accusing her for not investigating the situation more thoroughly before making her demand. At this moment, Heather bowed her head, trying to avoid Patricia's angry gaze. The Whitley family stood silent, their previously commanding presence now seemingly dissipating in the face of Jessica and Sophia's true identity. Sophia gently loosened her grip on Boo, her wide eyes now a mix of curiosity, astonishment, and something akin to pride beginning to spread. She looked up at her mother, recognizing the quiet confidence and strength her mother always carried but never flaunted. In that long, almost eternal silence, Patricia finally regained some semblance of composure, her voice now much softer than before. Ms. Evans, I sincerely apologize for the earlier incident. We had no knowledge of this connection. Please, both you and little Sophia may stay in your assigned seats. We will make sure everything is properly arranged. Jessica nodded slightly, requiring no further explanation. She sat down next to Sophia, gently stroking her daughter's small hand. Sophia smiled softly, her face lighting up again, not just because they had won, but because something deeper had been taught to her. She had seen firsthand the power of truth and self-respect. But Jessica knew that even though the situation had been resolved for now, this story was far from over. The gazes of the surrounding passengers, especially the Whitley family, revealed that today's journey had only begun a completely new chapter. Patricia's apology echoed clearly, almost immediately changing the tense atmosphere in the airplane cabin. The passengers around, who had been showing signs of discomfort or curiosity just moments ago, now fell silent, watching attentively, waiting for the next move from the veteran flight attendant. Patricia quickly regained her professional composure, adjusting the small scarf around her collar with skill, then gently approached the Whitley family. But this time, her gaze carried a clear decisiveness, a level of authority that could not easily be shaken by the wealth or status of anyone, not even someone like Dr. Richard Whitley. I'm terribly sorry, Doctor. Whitley, Patricia said in a soft yet firm voice, there has been a misunderstanding here. We will find a more suitable arrangement for your family. Ms. Evans and her daughter's seats will remain as originally booked. Richard Whitley flinched slightly, his expression showing a clear mix of surprise and discomfort. His wife, the elegant blonde woman, immediately furrowed her brows and responded, But Patricia, you clearly said this was a mandatory request from the crew due to my son's health condition. Why is it changing now? Patricia turned toward Mrs. Whitley, her gaze unwavering. Her voice remained polite but carried an unmistakable message that could not be contested. Mrs. Whitley, I regret the inconvenience. However, I have just been informed of the specific circumstances, and we have decided that the seating arrangements for Ms. Evans and little Sophia cannot be altered. We kindly ask for your understanding and cooperation as we find another solution. At this point, Dr. Whitley had completely lost his initial confidence. His face flushed red with anger, though he still managed to hold back his frustration, maintaining a semblance of civility. He lowered his voice, almost as a warning. "Patricia, I truly don't understand what's happening here. Do you know how much my family paid for these seats? How do you plan to explain this to the airline and your superiors?" Patricia silently observed Dr. Whitley, and for the first time since the conversation began, she gently but firmly responded with an air of calm authority. "Mr. Whitley, I'm fully aware of the situation, and I am confident the airline will come up with an appropriate solution for your family. But I also believe, as an important guest, you understand that airlines must strictly adhere to the rules and regulations set by the aviation industry, especially on this flight." Patricia's words were not just a simple explanation, but also clearly conveyed her deep respect for Jessica and the reputation of her husband, David Evans, who held a leading position in the U.S. aviation industry. Heather, standing behind, visibly pale, could see Patricia reversing the situation that the young flight attendant had initially created. The Whitley family now appeared to have no other options. The power and confidence they had shown earlier were no longer enough to win this situation. Mrs. Whitley struggled to hide her disappointment and softly persuaded her husband, "Richard, let it go. We'll find another way. I don't want to keep drawing attention." Whitley sighed heavily and reluctantly nodded. They turned and walked away, drawing curious and sympathetic glances from the nearby passengers. Patricia immediately turned back, giving a respectful nod to Jessica, her expression now softer, replaced by sincere appreciation. "Once again, I deeply apologize to you, Miss Evans, and to little Sophia for the inconvenience. I hope both of you have a comfortable and pleasant flight." Jessica responded with a polite nod, saying nothing more, as she knew that at this moment silence and calm were the best ways to assert her value and position. Sophia, too, was calming down, her large eyes shimmering with curiosity and surprise as she witnessed the completely different attitude from the experienced flight attendant. As Patricia walked away, Jessica glanced at Sophia, gently stroking her daughter's soft, curly hair, quietly reassuring, "It's okay, sweetie, everything's fine now." Sophia smiled at her mother, her eyes full of admiration and trust. But Jessica also understood that even though things were back to normal, the thoughts of what had just happened would likely remain in Sophia's mind for a long time. Ahead, Patricia discreetly called Heather over, her voice gentle but cold enough to make Heather shiver slightly. "Miss Heather, next time, before making any requests of passengers, make sure you fully understand their situation. Never let the airline find itself in a situation like today again." Heather silently nodded, realizing that this was a profound lesson in respect and responsibility in her job, one she would have to remember for the rest of her life. Meanwhile, Jessica leaned back in her seat, watching Sophia happily playing with the bunny Boo. The airplane stabilized, but Jessica knew very well that, although the immediate issue had been resolved, this event would undoubtedly be a topic of discussion once they landed at New York Airport, because it was the power and reputation of David Evans, her husband, that had completely shifted the outcome of today's situation. Once the plane had stabilized at a safe altitude, the passengers around began to return to their relaxed state, but Jessica still felt a lingering unease as she recalled the unexpected look of respect that Patricia had given her when she learned about her family's identity. She wondered what had caused the sudden and profound shift in the attitude of this experienced flight attendant. At that moment, Sophia had drifted off to sleep, resting gently against her mother's shoulder, her eyes closed tightly, her small hand still clutching her beloved rabbit, Boo. Jessica carefully adjusted the pillow supporting Sophia's neck, feeling a sense of relief as she saw her daughter peaceful once again. Just then, Patricia slowly approached Jessica. Her face was slightly hesitant, but her eyes remained serious and sincere. Jessica looked up, slightly surprised, but still politely waiting for Patricia to begin. "Miss Evans," Patricia spoke softly, just loud enough not to wake Sophia. "I apologize if I caused any inconvenience to you and little Sophia earlier. I really want you to understand the reason why I reacted the way I did when I heard your family name." Jessica remained silent, nodding slightly as a sign of agreement to listen to the story Patricia was about to share. Patricia paused for a moment, her gaze softening with clear emotion as she began to recall a memory from long ago. 10 years ago, there was a serious aviation accident in Denver. At that time, I was still new to the job, and that was the first flight I had directly participated in as part of the ground support team. My only brother was the co-pilot on that flight. A serious technical malfunction made it impossible for the plane to land in the usual way, and we were nearly desperate as the situation became life-threatening. Patricia stopped for a brief moment, her breath light but quick, as she remembered every painful detail of that tragic event. Jessica listened intently, feeling a deep sense of empathy for the woman standing before her. Patricia took a deep breath to calm herself, then continued her story with a voice full of emotion. "It was David Evans, your husband, who at the time was holding a senior position in aviation safety, who directly intervened in that situation. Not only did he guide the flight crew to handle the emergency step by step with clear and decisive instructions, but he also made the decision to allow for a risky emergency landing, the only one that could save the lives of everyone on board." Jessica could clearly feel the sincerity in Patricia's every word. She knew that David had faced many pressures and challenges in his job, but she had never realized that his courageous and responsible actions had left such a deep and lasting impact on others. Patricia looked at Jessica, her eyes filled with genuine gratitude. "Thanks to David Evans' quick and brave decision, my brother and the entire crew miraculously survived. For me and my family, that will never be forgotten. For the past 10 years, I have always remembered the name David Evans, not just because he was a leader in the aviation industry, but because he saved my loved ones." Jessica felt a lump in her throat as she listened to Patricia's heartfelt account. She had never heard this story from David's side. He had always been humble, rarely sharing important moments from his career. Patricia continued, her voice now gentle and persuasive. "When I heard your name was Evans, I was startled because I immediately thought of David Evans. I reacted strongly because I quickly realized I had made a huge mistake by treating the family of someone I owe such deep gratitude to with disrespect. Once again, I truly apologize." Jessica smiled faintly, her eyes softening as she looked at Patricia with understanding and compassion. "I appreciate you sharing this story with me. David has never told me the details of this, but I understand his character. He has always valued saving lives and safety over any kind of fame." Patricia nodded gently, her expression now calm and professional as usual, but with an added warmth and closeness. "I've learned a great lesson today about caution in my work, especially when it comes to assessing and recognizing passengers. I hope you understand that the respect I have for your family is sincere and comes not from position but from what David Evans accomplished." Jessica responded kindly, sincerely. "I completely understand, Patricia, and I truly appreciate you helping me see my husband from another perspective. I will share this story with David. He will surely be very moved." Patricia smiled lightly before returning to her duties. "Once again, I hope you and little Sophia have a comfortable flight. If you need anything, please let me know." As Patricia walked away, Jessica leaned back in her seat, looking down at Sophia, still peacefully asleep. She gently stroked her daughter's hair, her heart filled with pride and emotion. Because now, more than ever, Jessica understood that the most valuable thing David had brought was not just his fame and high position in aviation, but the trust and gratitude from those whose lives he had saved. And it was this realization that completely changed the way Jessica viewed the events that had unfolded on the special flight that day. After Patricia left, Jessica noticed a noticeable change in the way the crew treated her and Sophia. The tension that had hung in the air initially was now replaced with a surprising sense of friendliness and respect. It seemed Patricia's story about David Evans had quickly spread throughout the entire crew, creating a clear effect on their expressions. Just a little while later, Heather, the young flight attendant who had caused the initial awkward situation, shyly approached Jessica's seat. The confidence and pride she had displayed earlier were now completely gone, replaced by a clear sense of hesitation and remorse in her eyes and gestures. "Ms. Evans," Heather spoke softly, trying to keep her voice gentle so as not to disturb Sophia's sleep. "I would like to sincerely apologize to you and little Sophia for what happened earlier. I didn't handle the situation well, and it caused unnecessary misunderstandings." Jessica observed Heather for a moment, clearly noticing the sincerity in her words and the young woman's eyes. She gently smiled in response, her voice filled with understanding. "I accept your apology, Heather. The important thing is that we've all learned something from this situation." Heather let out a quiet sigh of relief, as if some of the mental burden she had been carrying since Patricia had reprimanded her had been lifted. The young flight attendant bent down slightly and said in a softer voice, "If you or Sophia need anything during the rest of the flight, please let me know right away." Jessica nodded gently in thanks. She now clearly understood that what had just happened on the plane wasn't merely a misunderstanding, but an opportunity for everyone, including Heather, to reassess the importance of respect and equality between people. Not just Heather, but other attendants in the crew began to give special attention to Jessica and Sophia. They gently walked by the seats of the two, occasionally asking politely if Jessica needed more pillows, drinks, or snacks for Sophia when she woke up. Every glance, every gesture was filled with respect and admiration, something that Jessica rarely felt so clearly before. But the biggest surprise came when the cockpit door suddenly opened, and the captain of the flight slowly stepped outside. He was a middle-aged man, his hair touched with gray, his demeanor confident and calm. The captain walked toward Jessica, politely nodded his head in greeting, and offered a friendly smile. "Hello, Ms. Evans. I'm Captain Michael Harris. I just heard Patricia tell me about the unfortunate incident earlier. I'm very sorry and would like to personally apologize to you." Jessica was slightly surprised to see the captain come up in person like this, but she quickly responded with a warm, polite smile. "Thank you, Captain Harris. I truly appreciate this." Captain Harris smiled gently, his eyes full of respect, as he spoke of David Evans. "I had the opportunity to meet and work with David Evans on several important occasions at the FAA. He's an incredible person. Responsible, determined, but always humble. Not just me, but nearly every pilot I've known holds him in the highest regard." The captain's sincere words made Jessica even more moved and proud of her husband, whom she had always loved and trusted. Harris continued, his voice filled with genuine enthusiasm. "That's why I wanted to come here personally, to ensure that from now until the end of the flight, you and little Sophia will always feel comfortable and at ease. Please consider this a sincere token of gratitude from us for the invaluable contributions the Evans family has made to the aviation industry." Jessica nodded slightly, deeply touched, and responded sincerely, "I'm truly grateful for this, Captain Harris. I'm sure David will be very pleased to hear about this kindness from you and the entire crew." Harris gently bowed his head once more, before politely returning to the cockpit. The actions of the captain quickly created a ripple effect of positivity throughout the flight, as the passengers around now looked at Jessica with clear respect, a stark contrast to the curiosity or discomfort they had shown earlier. Jessica gently leaned back in her seat, silently smiling as she thought about the profound change in the attitudes of everyone in such a short time. She felt a deep sense of pride and gratitude for David, the man who was not only an incredible husband and father, but also someone who had always quietly made a positive impact on the lives of so many others. At that moment, Sophia stirred slightly, opened her eyes, and smiled gently at her mother. "Mom, I dreamt about Dad. I saw him at the airport waiting for us." Jessica lovingly stroked her daughter's hair and softly replied, "Of course, Daddy will be there to welcome us, sweetheart." And in Jessica's heart, there was a sense of peace, trusting that everything that had happened on this flight today was a valuable reminder of the power of kindness, courage, and the true value of standing up for fairness and self-respect, values that she and David always strived to teach Sophia every day. While Jessica was still lost in her thoughts about the unexpected changes on the flight, Sophia was fully awake. She rubbed her eyes gently, carefully adjusted her dress, and then curiously looked around the plane cabin. Her gaze quickly landed on a passenger sitting across the aisle, a middle-aged woman with silver hair neatly tied up, her bright eyes full of intelligence as she attentively read a thick hardcover book. Sophia, being an open and confident little girl with a curious nature, immediately flashed a bright smile when the woman looked up and made eye contact with her. The woman instantly responded with a warm, friendly smile. "Sweetie, your yellow dress is beautiful," the woman said in a soft, warm voice. "Yellow always makes people feel happier, doesn't it?" Sophia smiled brightly, excited by the compliment. She quickly responded in a natural manner. "Thank you, ma'am. My mom says yellow helps me feel more confident. My name's Sophia Evans. What's your name?" The woman chuckled lightly, her eyes showing affection and delight at Sophia's natural charm. "Hello, Sophia. I'm Elena Diggs. You can call me Mrs. Elena. I'm a scientist, specializing in aviation safety." Jessica clearly heard the name Elena Diggs, her eyes immediately showing surprise mixed with curiosity. She gently leaned over, politely joining the conversation with a voice filled with evident admiration. "It's an honor to meet you, Doctor Diggs. I'm Jessica Evans, Sophia's mother. I've heard your name in several scientific articles about aviation." Elena happily nodded, her excitement growing as she heard Jessica introduce herself. "Jessica Evans, so I was right. I had a hunch when I heard the flight attendant mention the Evans name earlier. You must be David Evans's wife, am I right?" Jessica smiled gently, intrigued by the coincidence. "Yes, that's right. David is my husband, and Sophia is our daughter." Sophia quickly chimed in proudly, her clear voice ringing with excitement. "Do you know my dad, Mrs. Elena?" Elena looked at Sophia with affection, nodding with enthusiasm. "Oh, yes. I met your dad at an international aviation safety conference in Geneva 2 years ago. He gave a presentation on new safety standards that helped many countries reduce serious airplane accidents. Your dad really impressed many international scientists, myself included." Sophia's eyes widened in surprise and admiration. She knew her dad had an important job, but hearing about his major contributions for the first time made her realize just how influential his work was. "Is my dad that amazing?" Sophia couldn't hide the curiosity and pride in her voice. Elena gently patted the book in front of her, responding in a soft, affectionate tone. "Indeed, Sophia. What's special about your dad is not just his vast knowledge, but his courage, passion, and above all, his rare sense of responsibility. Thanks to your dad, many countries have changed regulations to better protect passengers. That's why he's so respected in the international aviation community." Jessica listened intently to every word Elena said, feeling deeply moved. She silently thanked this wise woman for helping her daughter understand the importance of David's work, a responsibility he always carried humbly and rarely shared with others. Sophia turned to her mother, her eyes sparkling as she spoke with excitement and pride. "Mom, Dad really is a hero, isn't he?" Jessica smiled warmly, gently stroking her daughter's hair. "That's right, sweetie. Your dad always does everything with the highest sense of responsibility and thinks about everyone's safety. He'll be so happy to hear you say that." Elena smiled softly, watching the two of them with a look of sincere affection. "You're very lucky, Sophia, to have a dad like David Evans. I believe that when you grow up, you'll do many wonderful things just like your dad." Sophia nodded proudly, realizing more than ever that what she had once thought was a simple job for her father was actually incredibly important and meaningful. That sense of pride warmed her heart, easing the discomfort she had felt when she first boarded the plane. At the same time, Jessica looked at Elena with genuine gratitude. Thanks to this unexpected encounter, she realized more deeply than ever that David's role was not only significant for America, but also an inspiration and motivation for many people around the world, a fact she had perhaps forgotten in her busy daily life. The flight suddenly felt much lighter and more meaningful for both Jessica and Sophia, and they both understood that this was not just a simple coincidence but a profound reminder of the true value of dedication, courage, and responsibility, things that David Evans had been quietly bringing to the world. Finally, the flight landed at JFK Airport under the dazzling sunset of New York City. After an emotional day, Jessica and Sophia were quickly greeted by the driver David Evans had thoughtfully arranged for them. In just a few hours, the mother and daughter would attend an important event, the prestigious International Aviation Exhibition held at the Marriott Hotel, where David was the keynote speaker. As they entered the grand and luxurious hall, Jessica held Sophia's hand tightly, feeling the formal atmosphere of the event. The sparkling lights illuminated the entire room, and the distinguished guests from both the American and international aviation industries were already present, engaging in warm and polite conversations. Amid friendly greetings from many familiar guests, Jessica suddenly recognized a familiar figure in the distance. Dr. Richard Whitley, the man who had caused the awkward incident on the plane. He stood next to an elegant older woman with silver-white hair, a noble yet gentle face. Before Jessica could look away, the elderly woman caught her gaze. She calmly stepped away from her spot and walked toward Jessica and Sophia with a determined yet composed demeanor. "Hello, Miss Evans," the elderly woman began politely, her voice soft and sincere. "I am Eleanor Whitley, Richard's grandmother. I heard my grandson tell me about the unfortunate incident on the flight. I truly want to personally apologize to you and little Sophia." Jessica was momentarily surprised by the sincere attitude from a member of the Whitley family. Sophia stood by her mother's side, her eyes wide, curiously looking up at the gentle elderly woman in front of her. "Mrs. Whitley," Jessica quickly responded, polite and sincere, "I appreciate you coming to meet us in person. Everything has been resolved amicably." Eleanor nodded gently, her eyes showing a hint of sadness, yet filled with deep understanding. "I am very disappointed in my grandson's behavior today. Richard has always been a good person, but sometimes the indulgence from a young age made him think that he could always get preferential treatment. When I heard about this, I was saddened because he didn't realize the unfairness of his request." She paused for a moment, exhaled lightly, and continued, her tone filled with respect. "But the more important reason I wanted to meet you in person today is because I truly admire your husband, David Evans. I've been following his work and contributions for a long time. What he has done for American and global aviation is truly admirable." Jessica listened attentively, feeling moved by the humility and sincerity of the elderly woman before her. At this moment, Sophia also gently stepped closer to Eleanor, her face filled with curiosity. "Grandma, do you know my dad?" Sophia asked. Eleanor smiled gently at Sophia, placing a soft hand on her shoulder. "Yes, Sophia. Your dad has done incredibly important work to protect the safety of millions. You are truly fortunate to have such a wonderful father. I sincerely apologize to you for the unfortunate events that happened today." Jessica looked deeply into Eleanor's sincere eyes, feeling clearly that her apology was not just a formality, but came from a real place of heart. Jessica responded softly, her tone genuine. "Thank you so much, Mrs. Whitley. I believe David will be very touched when he hears of the respect you have for him." Eleanor nodded gently, her gaze now profound, filled with deeper reflection. "I hope my grandson, Richard, will learn something from this. No one deserves to be treated unfairly, and we must always remember that position, status, or skin color should never be a reason to unfairly prioritize anyone." As Eleanor said this, Sophia looked up at her mother with an understanding expression, more so than ever before. Jessica smiled softly, feeling the profound lesson her daughter was receiving from this seemingly simple but deeply meaningful encounter. Just then, from the door of the hall, applause erupted as David Evans entered. He quickly spotted his wife and daughter, and his calm, confident demeanor immediately brightened when he saw Jessica and Sophia. He walked over with a warm and familiar smile, but was unexpectedly surprised to see Eleanor standing with them. A moment of surprise crossed his face, but David quickly regained his usual polite composure. "Hello, Mrs. Whitley, it's great to see you again," David said gently, with sincere politeness. Eleanor smiled and responded, "It's a pleasure to see you again, David. I just had a lovely conversation with your wife and daughter. You are indeed lucky to have such a wonderful family." David nodded slightly, his eyes full of affection as he looked at his wife and daughter, his heart filled with pride and gratitude. He understood that the most important thing was not just career success, but the values of life and the respect between people, values he always wanted to pass on to Sophia. The exhibition went smoothly in a friendly and meaningful atmosphere. But for Jessica and Sophia, the unexpected encounter with Eleanor Whitley today would surely remain a special memory, a profound reminder of kindness, respect, and fairness, values they always wanted to uphold in life. After that unforgettable exhibition, as the lights of New York gradually faded through the hotel window, Jessica sat by the window, quietly looking down at the city drifting into slumber. Sophia had been asleep for a long time, her serene, peaceful face making Jessica's heart feel both happy and troubled. The unexpected encounter with Mrs. Eleanor Whitley, along with the profound stories they heard today about David, had touched a very deep part of her heart. Jessica gently swiped through family photos on her phone. In each frame, David's warm smile always shone brightly, but the geographical distance between them was making family pictures increasingly rare. She suddenly realized that, for a long time, She and David had inadvertently traded their time together to pursue their individual careers. This not only made family bonds increasingly fragile, but also unwittingly robbed Sophia of the opportunity to understand and feel proud of the important role her father was playing. Jessica remembered the surprised and proud look in Sophia's eyes when she heard people like Mrs. Elena Diggs and Mrs. Eleanor Whitley talk about David. Until now, the little girl only knew that her dad worked in Washington, D.C., but today was the first time she realized how important that work was. Jessica silently blamed herself. She had been so caught up in her own life in Atlanta that she had forgotten how important it was to nurture her family's bond. At that moment, her phone vibrated. A new message from David. "Thank you for coming today with Sophia. I'm so proud and happy." Jessica smiled gently, her eyes briefly gleaming with emotion. That short message made her realize that family was more important than anything else she was chasing. Unconsciously, a strong thought formed in Jessica's mind. It was time for her to make a big decision, one not just for Sophia, but for the deep love she had for David. Jessica quietly stood up and walked over to the bed where Sophia was soundly asleep. She tenderly stroked her daughter's soft hair, her heart full of resolve. Washington, D.C. had always been a place she only visited on special holidays, but now it had to become home. A real home where the whole family could share their lives together every day. The next morning, as sunlight filtered through the curtains, Jessica sat with Sophia at the small hotel breakfast table. Sophia cheerfully chewed on her bread, her bright eyes eagerly focused on her mother. "Yesterday was amazing, wasn't it, Mom? I like Mrs. Elena and Mrs. Eleanor, too. They're so nice and even know about Dad." Jessica smiled gently, her voice full of affection as she replied, "Would you like it if we moved closer to Dad, Sophia?" The little girl paused, her eyes immediately lighting up, her voice full of excitement. "Really, Mom? If we could live near Dad, I'd love it. I could hear so many stories about Dad's important work." Jessica gently patted her daughter's head, her heart feeling truly at peace. "Yes, my dear, I've thought it through. Our family has been apart for too long. It's time for us to live closer together. There, you'll understand more about Dad and about me too. We'll be a much happier family." Sophia joyfully hugged her mother tightly, her bright laughter ringing through the room, making Jessica even more certain of her decision. She knew this would be a big change, one filled with many challenges and difficulties, but in her heart, there was only one certainty. It was the right choice. Before leaving the hotel, Jessica picked up the phone and called David. His warm, loving voice immediately came through on the other end. "Jessica, are you and Sophia getting ready for the airport?" She smiled softly, taking a breath before speaking with determination. "David, I want to tell you something important. I've thought it through, and I've made my decision. Sophia and I will be moving to Washington. Our family needs each other more than ever." There was a brief silence on the other end, and Jessica could almost hear his heart beating loudly. After a moment, David's voice came through, full of emotion and joy. "Are you sure?" "That's amazing, Jessica. I don't even know what to say right now, but that's the best news I've ever heard." "Yes, I'm sure. We've sacrificed enough, and now it's time for our family to be together," Jessica replied, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. When the call ended, Jessica felt lighter and more at peace than ever. She knew this decision would change the lives of her family forever, but it would surely be the best change of all. Looking down at Sophia, eagerly packing her toys into her little suitcase, Jessica smiled warmly, knowing that from this day forward, they would not only be a happier family but also one that truly understood each other's value. something no fame or career could ever replace. Jessica's decision to move to Washington, D.C. brought not only great joy to David, but also became a pivotal moment that helped both of them realize the true value of family. Once they settled into their new home, one rare quiet evening amidst their busy days, Jessica and David sat together, enjoying the closeness they hadn't experienced in a long time. Sophia was fast asleep in her own room, the small nightlight casting a gentle glow on the wall. Jessica took a sip of tea, her eyes fixed on the space ahead of her before softly speaking. "David, the incident on the flight really made me think a lot." David turned towards her, his eyes more tender and focused than ever before. "I heard Patricia briefly mention it, but I want to hear it directly from you. How did you feel when that happened?" Jessica paused for a moment, then sighed softly. "At first, I was angry and upset, but then came the fear, David. Not fear for myself, but for Sophia. Our daughter is still too young to understand why people would treat her unfairly like that. What broke my heart the most was that she immediately recognized that the situation was exactly like what happened at the restaurant. I'm afraid that these experiences will hurt her or make her lose the confidence she once had." David thought for a moment, his gaze revealing worry and deep contemplation. Gently, he took Jessica's hand, speaking softly yet resolutely. "Jessica, you're right. We can't protect Sophia entirely from the prejudices out there, but we can help her understand the world better, so she's strong and confident enough to face it. I'm sorry I haven't been there for you and Sophia more during moments like this." Jessica shook her head, her eyes filled with empathy. "It's not your fault, David. Your job is to protect millions of others. I understand that, and I'm always proud of you for it. But now, I also understand that it's just as important for us to be together, to raise Sophia to grow up strong, full of self-respect and confidence." David gently pulled Jessica into his embrace, the familiar warmth of his arms making her feel steadier than ever. He whispered, "We'll spend more time with her, not just so Sophia understands the challenges she'll face, but also so she's proud of her heritage, confident in herself no matter what the situation." Jessica looked up at David, her eyes now filled with trust. Meeting Mrs. Eleanor Whitley at the exhibition made me realize that sometimes even good people can unknowingly have prejudices. The important thing is that we always remain patient, to explain, to teach Sophia how to respond appropriately and strongly." David nodded in agreement, his eyes full of determination. "That's right. And it's also an opportunity for Sophia to understand that true strength isn't in wealth or status, but in how we treat others. We need to show her that even in the face of injustice, we can respond with kindness and inner strength." Jessica smiled gently, her heart feeling much lighter after this conversation. "I believe we can do that, David. I want Sophia to grow up in a family where she never doubts her own worth just because others don't see it." David tightened his grip on Jessica's hand, his voice soft yet firm. "We will make it happen. I'll try to rearrange my work so I can spend more time with you and Sophia. We'll always be there for her to help her overcome any challenge." In that cozy little room, amidst the stillness of the night, Jessica felt more than ever that the bond between her and David was no longer just built on love, but also on the shared responsibility of being parents. She realized that their most important role right now wasn't their careers or status, but how they raised Sophia to become a strong person, one who respects herself and is always proud of her heritage. Jessica rested her head on David's shoulder, whispering with emotion, "Thank you for always understanding me, David. I know we'll get through all of this together." David gently kissed her forehead, responding with sincere words. "We will, Jessica. As long as we're together, we can face anything." And in that rare moment of peace, both of them understood that their decision to live closer wasn't just about bridging the gaps between them, but also a crucial step in building a solid foundation for Sophia, so she could grow up confident, strong, and always proud of herself. That was the greatest gift they could give their daughter. It was through that profound conversation that Jessica began to realize that David's role was not just limited to the aviation industry or the high-ranking position he held. His contributions and important decisions in his career actually carried a much greater significance. It was the fact that he was playing a part in changing society's perception of Black people in important leadership positions. Each day that passed in Washington, D.C., Jessica observed more closely how David worked, how he interacted with senior colleagues and partners from around the world. She could clearly see that, while the power he held was immense, what made people truly respect and trust David wasn't his title, but his leadership qualities of responsibility and integrity that were always present in every decision he made. One day, Jessica took Sophia to visit her father's office. There, the little girl witnessed firsthand how David communicated with his colleagues, how he patiently listened and understood each issue before making decisions. Sophia stood still beside her mother, her eyes wide open as she watched her father. At that moment, she truly realized how much of an impact her father had on the lives of so many people. After the meeting ended, Sophia ran over to David, her voice full of excitement and admiration. "Dad, you're amazing. I can see how much everyone respects you. I'm so proud of you." David smiled warmly, gently hugging Sophia to him, replying in a loving tone, "Thank you, sweetheart. But remember, the reason people respect you isn't because you're powerful or wealthy. It's because you always do what's right. You always care about and help others. That's what really matters, my dear." Sophia nodded seriously, as if engraving her father's words in her mind. Jessica stood nearby, watching, her heart touched by the scene. She understood that the most important lessons Sophia received today didn't come from textbooks, but from actions, from character, and from the quiet lessons David was instilling in their daughter's heart. The more Jessica lived close to David, the clearer she became about the fact that he wasn't just changing the biases in the aviation industry, he was truly changing the way society viewed Black people in powerful positions. She recalled the words Mrs. Eleanor Whitley had spoken at the exhibition, that it was David's perseverance and responsibility that were gradually dismantling these long-held biases, paving the way for many others to follow. One evening, when the whole family was gathered together, Jessica gently said to David with pride in her voice, "David, you know, what you're doing isn't just making people safer when they fly. You're really contributing to changing society, helping people like us stand proudly in any position." David paused for a moment, then responded gently but with determination, "Jessica, that's exactly what I think about every day. I've seen too many talented people go unrecognized just because of the prejudice against their skin color. I want Sophia to grow up in a world where she doesn't have to fight to prove her worth, a world where everyone is judged by their abilities and character, not by anything else." Jessica squeezed his hand gently, her eyes shining with emotion. "I believe we're getting closer to that world, and I'm so proud that you're the one leading the way." Sophia looked up at her parents, hearing and understanding everything they were saying. She gently interjected with a firm voice, "I want to be like you both, do a lot of good things so everyone understands that we are all the same, and everyone deserves respect." David and Jessica laughed happily, their eyes filled with love and pride as they saw the maturity in their daughter's thinking. They both knew that David's greatest legacy wasn't power or personal success, but the trust and pride he was building in Sophia's heart each day. That night, as Sophia slept soundly in her parents' arms, Jessica whispered softly to David in the quiet space, "I realize that the greatest thing you're doing isn't changing the aviation industry or becoming the best leader. The most valuable legacy you're leaving is the self-respect, strength, and belief in the future that you've passed on to our daughter." David gently squeezed Jessica's hand, his voice full of emotion and resolve. "That's right, Jessica. And that's the most important legacy we can leave for Sophia. That's my biggest purpose in life." And in that moment, Jessica understood that they were not only building their family's happiness, but also constructing a better future, a future where Sophia and many other children would grow up with pride and confidence, regardless of their skin color, background, or anything else. That was truly the most important and meaningful thing David and she were striving toward together every day. It is from these deep reflections on the valuable legacy that David is quietly building that Jessica becomes even more certain of her decision to move closer to her husband. She understands that this not only helps Sophia grow more confidently, but it also brings their entire family back together after many years of being apart due to work commitments. A few days later, Jessica starts searching for a suitable house near David's office in Washington, D.C. When she gently shared this decision one evening, David was momentarily taken aback, his eyes shimmering with emotions and indescribable happiness. "Jessica, are you serious? You really want to move here?" Jessica smiled warmly, her voice gentle yet full of determination. "I've thought it through, David. We've spent so much time prioritizing work and, unintentionally, missed precious moments with Sophia and our family. I don't want us to be apart anymore. Our family deserves to live together, completely." David, overwhelmed, hugged Jessica tightly, feeling his heart beat stronger than ever. He spoke softly, but with deep sincerity. "You can't imagine how happy I am to hear you say this, Jessica. I know I've been so caught up in work that I sometimes forget that our family is the most important thing. I promise to spend more time with you and Sophia, making up for all the time we've been apart." Jessica squeezed his hand, her eyes warm and understanding. "I don't blame you, David. I understand the huge responsibility you bear, but I believe we can find a better balance so that both you and I, along with Sophia, will always feel happy and fulfilled." From that moment, they quickly began searching for and preparing their new home. Sophia was also thrilled to hear the news. The little girl excitedly thought about seeing her dad every day, hearing him share interesting stories from work, and most importantly, growing up with both her mom and dad by her side. One sunny afternoon, when the family officially moved into their new home, peacefully nestled in a neighborhood near downtown Washington, Sophia happily ran through the rooms, her eyes sparkling with joy. David stood in the doorway, quietly watching his daughter and wife excitedly unpack and decorate their new home, his heart overflowing with gratitude and happiness. He gently walked up behind Jessica, wrapped his arms around her, and whispered with deep emotion, "Thank you, Jessica, for everything. You've brought the most precious thing into my life, love and family." Jessica turned to look at her husband, her eyes gleaming with happiness, and gently responded with the sincerest tone, "I also thank you, David. It's because of you that I've realized career and success only truly matter when we can share them with the people we love the most." At that moment, Sophia cheerfully ran up and hugged both of her parents in her small arms, her voice filled with excitement. "Our family will live happily ever after here, right, Mom and Dad?" David and Jessica looked at each other and smiled lovingly, then gently bent down to hug Sophia tightly, answering in unison with warm voices, "That's right, sweetie. Our family will always be together, and we will build wonderful days ahead together." In that moment, all three of them felt that all the challenges and prejudices they had faced were no longer frightening, because they knew that as long as their family was together, no difficulty was insurmountable. That evening, under the warm golden lights of their new home, David gently told Sophia stories from his career, special flights, wonderful people he had met. Sophia listened intently, her eyes filled with pride and happiness as she thought how important her dad was. Jessica watched this scene with deep emotion in her heart. She knew that the decision to reunite their family was the greatest gift she could give to Sophia and David. She whispered softly in her heart, from now on, not only would they be closer to each other, but most importantly, they had truly become a family, where each person understood each other's value, loved one another, and faced life's challenges together. And more than ever, Jessica believed that this was the beginning of a beautiful life, where love, understanding, and pride in oneself would forever be the most precious legacy they could pass on to Sophia, so that she would grow strong, confident, and ready to take on the world. A new life in Washington, D.C. gradually helped Sophia grow up. With each passing day, she became more confident and understood more about the important values in life. The special experiences with her parents, especially how David always took time to talk, listen, and guide his daughter, became a solid foundation for Sophia to deeply understand the power of knowledge, understanding, and the true value that family brings. In this new environment, Sophia no longer hesitated or shrank away when faced with difficult situations or the subtle prejudices around her. On the contrary, she became stronger and filled with self-respect, as she clearly understood the role, responsibility, and respect her parents always worked hard to build within the community. One beautiful afternoon, when Jessica arrived at school to pick up Sophia after class, the young teacher cheerfully stepped out to meet Jessica and smiled sincerely. "Miss Evans, Sophia is truly a special girl. She bravely stood up to protect her friends when some others were being treated unfairly because of their skin color. Sophia spoke about your father, about the things your family has always tried to build, and it moved all of us deeply. We are so proud." Upon hearing those words, Jessica's heart was filled with emotion and happiness. She knew that the profound lessons about the power of self-respect, social responsibility, and courage that they had been nurturing in Sophia had finally borne fruit in the clearest and truest way. That evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, Jessica gently shared the story with David. He paused for a moment, then looked at his daughter with eyes full of pride and emotion. "I am so proud of you, Sophia. You know, what you did today is even more important and wonderful than anything I do at the office." Sophia smiled, her eyes shining with happiness, but she responded seriously with a tone full of maturity. "I just did what's right, just like you and Mom have always taught me. I understand that it's our responsibility to protect those around us, especially when they're being treated unfairly." Jessica looked at her husband and daughter, feeling a deep sense of pride. She felt more content than ever with the decision to prioritize family over all the career opportunities she had once considered. Jessica realized that social status and power were not the end goal, but the starting point for each person to fulfill their responsibility to the community and their family. And in that warm moment, Jessica gently shared with David and Sophia the profound realization she had gathered after all their experiences. "Our family has learned something incredibly valuable, and that is that strength and responsibility always go hand in hand. especially when we hold important positions in society. Your father and I have always tried to protect and build a better life for you, Sophia. But the most important thing is that you've understood your responsibility to everyone around you, to the community, and to yourself." David took Jessica's hand, his eyes full of emotion and pride. "Exactly, Jessica. I think the most important message we want to convey to Sophia is to always be proud of her roots, her family, and herself. We can use our positions and reputation to create positive change, to fight against prejudice and injustice in society." Sophia listened attentively, then suddenly hugged her parents tightly. She spoke softly but clearly. "I promise that I will always remember what you've taught me. I'm proud to be your daughter, and I'll always do good things so everyone understands that everyone deserves respect." Those sincere words rang out in the warm room, becoming the greatest joy and pride in David and Jessica's lives. They understood that, after all the challenges, they had truly found the most profound meaning of life. It was the key role of family in nurturing self-respect, building awareness, and instilling values in their children, especially in a society still filled with prejudices and challenges. And so, in their cozy home in Washington, D.C., Jessica and David continued to write a new, meaningful chapter in their lives, one about pride and responsibility when loved ones hold important positions, about how identity, power, and social responsibility can be used to push back against racial prejudices and contribute to positive changes for the future of everyone. Through the Evans family's story, we have explored profound values about social responsibility, pride in one's roots, and the true power that comes from understanding our roles in the community. Sometimes, simply standing up against injustice can help change seemingly unshakable prejudices. What about you? Have you ever encountered a similar situation, and how did you handle it? Share your thoughts below. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like the video, share it with friends, and subscribe to the channel to not miss any of the interesting stories coming next. Thank you for always being with us.